and hit the U.S. And the polar bear population, it's expanding rapidly, and there are more polar bears than there were in 1970. There isn't any climate crisis. It was totally manufactured by scientists who got linked to the radiative forcing formula, which they had received billions of dollars to develop and try to prove. So I think we can go right ahead with our very good lifestyle, our modern society. We can even power Las Vegas and continue with life. Yes, I love the earth, and I want to come up with alternate energy sources. I want to protect the water and the air, but I know that our earth is going to be just fine with the burning of fossil fuels as long as they last. We can have a...
So you talked about mathematization earlier,
Right.
right? And he popped up that little equation at the end
Right.
after totally debunking all of their math and models with, I mean, this is a guy who still probably believes a lot of what NASA says, and
Sure.
but he's using their own methods, and even by their own metrics, they're just
So off.
completely off. What did you think about that clip, right?
Well, he's basically just applying their chartism against their suggestions and speculation. They're like, well, actually, there's all these other indicators that are showing that this is not an accurate prediction, or
Right.
that this isn't a crisis by any stretch. It's basically aggrandized equations and groupthink.
That don't even
Yeah.
pan out if you even agree with the measurement methods, and that's
Right.
something.
That's also highly dubious.
He appeared on. I just want to make this point on the Alex Jones show a while back. I remember hearing him talk about the fallacy of their models, and one of them was the use of the thermometer. Right, that was not invented. It was invented in the last 200 years. Used systemically in the last 80, right? But even systemically, it was not, they didn't have thermometers in all of, in a high resolution around the globe, which would include various
Right.
elevations and places of extremes, that are hard to get to and expensive to get to. Nobody's put the resources into that. And then, so you really, again, going back to that ridiculous chart, the evidence on the ice cores, right? You have to believe that they can accurately go back so far. But John Coleman was saying the thermometer, which is how we would even measure things today, has a pretty high degree of a margin of error.
I'm sure it does.
Right? If you go back 80 years, a margin of error up to 3 degrees, which is fine if you're setting the thermostat in your house. But if we're going to, bicker and basically exert authoritarianism across the world, reduce, the population, deindustrialize
the
over,
entire world.
a 1/10 of a degree average or something. It's okay. So it's a little warmer. Like, y'all are absolutely out of your mind.
Well, and it's like, wait, and then carbon dioxide levels supposedly spiked when life was teeming on the Earth. So how do you reconcile all the spike in carbon dioxide today with it being somehow bad for life? Doesn't carbon dioxide ultimately fuel the expansion
That's
of
just
life?
the most basic, and these people talk about science all the time, and it's like, we learned that in science, to I'm not one to compliment the public education system, but we did learn that plants breathe CO2. And so it's just it's a bold thing that they're trying to do, that they're trying to sell.
Such hubris. I mean, there's just the amount of absurdity that goes into it. It's part and parcel to the whole, Terraqueous orb monkey man hypotheses, that it's speculatively ensconced itself in the entire substrate of science. And so today, when people think science, they automatically adopt this basically occult hermeneutic that's been passed down through oligarchical ideologies for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So instead of seeing that as a recapitulation of old world mind control
Feudalism
and feudalist cycles, people are seeing it as, you know, some new enlightened way of interpreting the world. It's like, no, there's nothing new under the sun here. This is just a repackaging and a reformulation of a lot of the same misanthropic elitist elements that have been.
And that's
present
why
throughout history.
when you actually ask the right questions of people like Neil deGrasse Tyson or Bill Nye, they will tell you that they, in their mind, the logic that they've set up for themselves, you are infringing on their right because they subscribe to this religion of climate apocalypticism and catastrophe, such that it is to them as if you are stabbing your neighbor. And that's why you support government force in the case of assault, right? I mean, you say yes, and they say, well, okay, this is assault. You're assaulting my children by not reducing your carbon footprint, so we should arrest you. That is what people like Bill Nye and Neil deGrasse Tyson, that is what they've signed up for.
Well, and that is just like Minority Report level totalitarianism.
Yeah.
And it's like neo-Stalinism as well.
Right.
You know, you show me the man, I'll show you the crime. I mean, even though you're coming up with rational refutations of their bald speculation, your rational refutation is a crime and their bald speculation is law.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just like, call a spade, you know, it's right there in your face. It's this whole open conspiracy H.G. Wells methodology where they can, basically admittedly lose any rational debate, but it doesn't matter to them because they have this force majeure backing from the establishment because they're parroting the preferred ideology.
Right.
Yeah.
So the IPCC's got 4,000 of the top scientists, and
Right.
they have put forth the evidence, which you can find at climate.nasa.gov/evidence. But here's a guy, he's not a grad student, 10 years away from his PhD. It looks like he's
Right.
got some gray hair. You included this
In the article.
in the article. You want to set this one up?
Well, so basically, this guy is a meteorologist in the field, and he basically applies some common sense considerations to the speculative, panic-based claims of a lot of the environmentalist alarmists. And even though he accepts like even some of the premises or some of the suggestions of the data that there is warming occurring, and as we've already done, that can be problematized in itself. But even though he kind of accepts that, he basically still admits, like, no, like I can't buy this ideology after certain points, thinking about these particular considerations that he brings up. And one of them is just like, what places were being measured back then that's supposedly hard and fast, chartable data versus all of the various methods that we're using today to, measure entirely different environments.
Right.
And then, injecting that data into the overall average that wasn't considered in previous data that were also charting in the same graph. Like, so it's...
So
he has some
even
basic good
in
questions.
the institutions,
Right.
there are still practitioners of legitimate science
Right.
looking at this and coming to their own conclusions, which are sort of obvious to some and not to others.
Right, and even though there's some, at some point, even people who are careerists in Science Incorporated, one way or another, there's still enough of a consciousness that says, well, I can't just accept any claim that purports to be scientific because it's dressed up that way.
Right.
Let's see a little
Just
bit
because
more
you've
behind
got
methodology.
a few,
Right.
an acronym.
Right, and as Tarpley aptly put, the dark hand of formalism.
Right.
Loved that, and the fetishization of